daily soccer podcast with the Global Sports Podcast Network.
Welcome back to the Daily Premier League podcast brought to you by the Global Sports Podcast Network. My name is Nick and I rejoin you again for 2 successive days in a row. Yesterday we talked about Arsenal, the Champions League games that happened, the Champions League games that happened last night as well. And that's where we'll kick things off again to review last night's Premier League team's performances in the Champions League, kicking things off with Liverpool, who were the landmark game going into their Champions League match against Frankfurt off of 4 consecutive losses, but they rebounded incredibly well with a 5-1 victory in Germany. It was a very dominant win, but a game that perhaps still had a few issues, but it would feel a little nitpicky to go through them, so maybe I'll get out of the way quickly. We still saw a few defensive issues, I think particularly on that brilliant Frankfurt goal. The pressing and defending was still a little bit all over the place, but at the end of the day, they won 5-1. Welcome to the set-piece party, Liverpool, as Virgil van Dijk and Konate both scored from corners. But there was also 3 really good goals and none better than Dominic Szoboszlai, who got the 5th goal from outside the box with a very low driven effort across goal to really cap things off for Liverpool. It was Ekitike who got things underway as Liverpool punished for the first time of 2 of their 5 goals. They punished the high line of Frankfurt. We saw that naivety, which is the reason why they've conceded the most goals in the Bundesliga so far, which is 18 goals in the Bundesliga, and they've conceded 11 already in the Champions League. 3 successive 5-1s, but one of which they won, 2 of which they lost, which is incredibly impressive, to be honest, to manage to have 3 5-1s in a row. But Liverpool, I thought the initial lineup was quite interesting with both Isak and Ekitike and Gakpo on the left, but he had Slot had Frimpong at right back, so in my mind he was going to try and play a front 4 where you'd have Gakpo on the left, then Isak and Ekitike as 2 strikers and Frimpong basically acting as the right winger, but unfortunately due to Frimpong getting injured again, we didn't really get to see that come into fruition really. I feel like we saw it a little bit with Bradley just after he'd come on, but he's not that sort of wing back, so he didn't really last. But maybe that's something to watch out for, where Liverpool play with 2 strikers, but it doesn't necessarily look like that on the lineup, but it ends up looking like that in the game. It was Christensen's goal for Frankfurt which got things underway, an unbelievable counter-attacking back-to-front move, which was so fluid and really just tore through Liverpool as they pressed quite weirdly, leaving spaces in the middle. And Christensen's probably a bit lucky that his finish was so good, because it was an ambitious shot to take for the right back, but it gave Frankfurt the lead, but things turned around really quickly as Ekitike got the first, then Van Dijk and Konate both scored from corners, and Gakpo got the 4th goal and Szoboszlai got the 5th goal to round things up for Liverpool. On to another team that won 5-1 last night, Chelsea, with an incredibly comfortable 5-1 win of their own against Ajax. We spoke about it yesterday, how poor Ajax have been so far this season, and it really didn't help that the captain decided to go through the lower leg of, I believe it was Enzo Fernandez, after 18 minutes, and after a review was sent off by the referee, who weirdly went to the screen, looked at it for less than a second, and then turned around and went to deliver the red card. But in fairness, it was a very obvious decision to make for the referee after he'd seen it. Otherwise, it felt like we were beginning to see more of Esteval's brilliance that had been hyped up from his times at Palmeiras. But otherwise, there's not a lot to say about this game, as there was 2 deflected goals for Chelsea, 2 penalties for Chelsea, and then Mark Guiu, who got the first goal from the second phase of a free kick directly after Kenneth Taylor's red card. Maybe a slight bit of controversy in Tosin Adarabioyo not getting a second yellow for a foul on Weghorst, who was Ajax's goal scorer from a penalty, but I don't know how much it would have changed things really, as Chelsea are and should just be the better team against this Ajax team currently. But Heitinga perhaps under pressure again. Maybe we'll see him reunited with Slot if he does end up getting sacked by Ajax anytime soon. But Chelsea got their job done and move on with yet another win in the Champions League. The final team, who I forgot to talk about yesterday, and I promise it has nothing to do with me being an Arsenal fan, I just genuinely didn't see them when I was looking through the games that were happening last night. But Spurs, I forgot them yesterday, and it seemed they forgot they were playing as well, as every highlight of their game when I was watching Match of the Day to catch up on this game was Monaco somehow not scoring. Foran Balogun, the former Arsenal Academy product, should have had to himself 2 really good saves from Vicario. Jordan Teze missed a really good headed chance. But at the end of the day, Tottenham survived to get a 0-0 draw away at Monaco, who will be incredibly annoyed that they didn't win this game, as they completely dominated based on what BBC showed on Match of the Day. And it's a little bit interesting. I keep seeing more and more Spurs fans who are concerned about how things are going this season. Their position in the Premier League is generally fine, but I think the performances and some of the results aren't particularly pleasing because they have this manager who is so incredibly highly rated, and it's just not clicking at the moment. I saw some discussion about the midfield that Frank is picking just isn't really giving them anything, and people want to see Archie Gray, people want to see Lucas Bergvall, people want to see Pape Mate Sarr, and that makes complete sense when Bentancur and João Painha aren't really giving them much otherwise. So we'll see how that develops over the rest of this season, because I mean, it would be completely stupid to get rid of him. I think he has at least this season, and things would have to go incredibly wrong for Frank to be gone after this year. But I think they'll be fine, but there's clearly some teething issues, as you'd probably expect, especially after Ange's reign, where things were so drastically different to what Frank wants to do. And I really recommend trying to find the clip of Will Still, the Southampton manager, talking about how when he was telling his players some instructions, they were almost going, "Oh, like, are we allowed to do that?" But after what they'd been through with Russell Martin and what he wanted them to do, so trying to get players to unlearn things is perhaps something we don't really talk about enough when a new manager comes in, and so it feels like Frank could be going through that a little bit. I'm sure things will improve, but yesterday was not a bright spot for Spurs under Thomas Frank. We'll move on to tonight's Europa League games. There's not a lot to talk about apart from one game, but first, let's hear about Bioniq.
Your body is unique. And Global Sports Podcast Network has partnered with Bioniq, the world's most personalised supplements. Bioniq provide 100% tailor-made supplements designed to deliver precisely what your body needs at exactly the right level to optimise your health. No guessing. So click the link in the show notes. Use the code GSPN2025 for 40% off your first month's subscription. Bioniq. Don't settle for off-the-shelf solutions made for just anybody. Get what's right for you right now. Your body.
3 games tonight in the Europa League. Go Ahead Eagles play Aston Villa, Forest against Porto, and then Palace v AEK Larnaca. We'll kick it off with the only real big game in this, which is Forest versus Porto. The first game for Dyche in charge of the Tricky Trees as he's reunited with Chris Wood. We could see the Kiwi return to the form of last season potentially, as he found success with Chris Wood at Burnley previously. I think the setup will be far more suited to this squad than Ange's ever was going to be, as we're all aware of Dyche's setup being far more defensive and how that is far more closely aligned to what Nuno was looking to do and found success with last year. This will be a very impressive game to avoid defeat in, because this is going to be an incredibly difficult team to beat in Porto. Francesco Farioli has started the season incredibly by winning 10 out of their 11 games and drawing the other. And in their 6 away games, they have a combined 16-1 record. So this Porto team are a real contender to win the whole thing. Whereas Forest are winless in 10, with Ange's 8-game winless reign being a large part of that. So it will be very difficult for Forest to win this game, but I think we're all in agreement, really, that this team is far more suited to what Dyche will do. And while this game may not necessarily show it in results, I'm sure we'll start to see the pattern of play and the defensive solidity Dyche will bring them. And I think it's quite nice for Dyche individually to get the sort of European games that he never got to have with Burnley after they were controversially eliminated by Olympiacos, obviously also owned by Marinakis. So I do wonder if he holds some resentment against his new boss, really, after what happened with Burnley. So that is the big game tonight in the Europa League. The other 2 games are Villa against Go Ahead Eagles, who are in the competition for the first time, the Dutch team. They currently sit in the Eredivisie 12th out of 18 teams, with 2 wins, 4 draws, and 3 losses, scoring 15 and conceding 16. I just think Villa should have no problems here. This is a team at home. They're travelling to Go Ahead Eagles, so maybe a fan base new to the competition will be incredibly lively, but Villa were in the Champions League last year. This shouldn't be an issue for them. So I expect a comfortable win for the Brummy side. The other game going on in the Conference League this time is Crystal Palace against AEK Larnaca from Cyprus. They are 5th in the Cypriot League out of 14 teams, winning 4 games, drawing 1, losing 2, scoring 14, conceding 8. So they won 3 of their last 5, but are, I would imagine, underperforming considering they're in the Conference League and 5th in the league at the moment. So I think this should be relatively easy for Palace. We'll see. It'll be interesting to see how much rotation they go for, because this isn't a tremendously deep Palace squad, but they're going to need to rotate and have these fresh legs. I think having Eddie Nketiah able to come in for Jean-Philippe Mateta, who is going to be really useful. Nketiah had a lot of Europa League games for Arsenal, so he's kind of used to even a higher level of competition than this, but kind of having these sort of games on a Thursday. So they'll have a few players used to this. I think similar to Villa, this shouldn't be a problem, especially with Palace at home in this game. They should win this comfortably for me. And that is all 3 games covered for the Europa League and Conference League tonight. We'll hear a bit about Zencastr and then preview tomorrow night's Premier League game.
Here at the Global Sports Podcast Network, we spent a lot of time selecting our delivery platform. Zencastr came out as the clear winner. With 4K video recording from your phone, AI editing that automatically removes all those ums and ahs, it's super easy to start a podcast that sounds great and is delivered efficiently. If you're ready to tell your story, check out the link in the description to learn more about Zencastr.
So a reminder, there is a Premier League game on Friday night, so those of you with fancy teams, remember to do them before, I believe it's 6 p.m, or roughly then anyway. And it is Leeds United hosting West Ham at Ellen Road, an early relegation 6-pointer where I believe a loss for Daniel Farke could really put the pressure on him. So they were already looking to replace him after he won promotion in the summer, and a loss here against West Ham, who have looked incredibly bad, could really push things over the edge as they go into a really difficult run coming up. So points against someone like West Ham are going to be so important. A loss for West Ham on the other side, a loss for West Ham on the other hand, could bring a little bit of concern for Nuno and his side after they were really, really, really bad on Monday night against Brentford. But I believe Nuno's recent track record is just far too positive, and he hasn't been there long enough to really be under pressure already. But I think more so a loss would really hammer home that this team is almost destined to go down unless they really try and salvage things in January. Because this team, I've said it for a long, long time on this podcast, this team is so bad. And although Nuno's setup could hide some of the concerns in this squad, it's still such a bad squad. And if Bowen was to get injured at any point, they're screwed. And like I've said before, if Bowen's not scoring, who is going to score in this team? But Leeds, going back to them and why I think a loss here could really be quite scary for them. They have Brighton and Forest away after this, who Brighton are usually quite weird in that they're really good against the top teams, but then struggle against the lower teams under Hertzler. And then Forest away, Sean Dyche may have had a bit of time to sort things out by then. And then there's an international break and a disgusting 4-game run on the forefront for Villa after that. On the forefront for Leeds after that. I was just reading my notes because they have Villa first after the international break, and then Manchester City, Chelsea, and Liverpool. So they're going to want to have some points in the bank, and more importantly, I think the confidence and the morale that comes with that before they go into that difficult run, because you just can't see them getting any points from that run, and then you're into the slog of the December Christmas break, New Year fixture congestion, and then things can get really messy from there. So this feels really important for Leeds, and although they're not in their relegation zone at the moment, they lost to Burnley at the weekend, who have beaten both Sunderland and Leeds despite not having a particularly strong start to the season themselves. Their ability to pick points up against these lower teams could be crucial, and Leeds haven't shown that quite yet. So apart from a win against Wolves, who sit bottom still, winless, a win against West Ham just feels so important, and it would take them to 11 points, which would shoot them up the table to 13th place before the rest of the games at the weekend. A win for West Ham wouldn't even take them above Leeds. It would put them only up to 18th above Nottingham Forest going into the weekend, with Burnley on the same amount of points, but with a far better goal difference. And West Ham, who have 4 losses in their last 5, play 2 of the 3 promoted teams the next 3. Obviously, Leeds tomorrow night, and then Burnley, who are sandwiched by Newcastle. And it's going to be crucial to the belief around this team's survival and building some momentum for Nuno. So this game may not be particularly entertaining, but I think it's going to be incredibly important. And at the moment, I give Leeds the minor edge purely for being at home, and the atmosphere on a Friday evening at Elland Road could be unbelievable. So that is going to be that for today's episode of the Daily Premier League podcast, brought to you by Global Sports Podcast Network. My name has been Nick Bird. Enjoy the rest of your evenings, and don't forget your fantasy teams tomorrow. Thank you for joining me.
Your daily soccer podcast with the Global Sports Podcast Network.